All right. Well, welcome to today's time of prayer for Israel. It's November 26th. And for the Americans, just to keep clear, we are plowing through the whole week. Okay. Even with Thanksgiving, Canadians, make sure you're on because it's not Thanksgiving in Canada. And for the Americans, if you hop on if you want to, we have some great guests on. Avner, thank you for joining. We want to hear you on whatever you have to give us. Yes, salute to you. Two things. When you did a really brilliant email, please put on the list on the chat again how people can sign up for your emails, explaining this credible hatred against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, because I want to hear you talk about that. The International Criminal Court, it's just so bizarre. But even the fact that the EU is now saying, yes, we will uphold the arrest of him and Gallant as well. The G7 are deciding, as I understand it, the G7 are meeting, so the seven wealthy nations of the world. But then the internal as well, the fact that, that this attorney general is pushing for Netanyahu to have to go into the court proceedings December 3rd, I think it is, even though, you're trying to fight a war here. And if you could speak on, is there any progress with ceasefire with Hezbollah? So I'd love to hear that because from this part of the side of the pond, it's so, we don't understand the hatred that is in Israel for the prime minister. So over to you, my friend. Thank you for sharing, and then we'll be praying.
It's good to be with you all. I especially enjoy seeing Stuart and Janet's face out there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Greetings. I can't see everybody there, but I do recognize those two faces. And Jessica as well. Hello, Jessica. Well, I had a teacher once who quoted from another teacher who said that a text without a context is a pretext. And this refers, of course, to biblical studies, that if you use a text, but you don't understand the context, sometimes one doesn't interpret it correctly. I think a lot of what goes on in Israel, people have no context whatever to understand it. And one of the reasons that I and other people try to write is to help give that context so that one knows how to pray better for what's going on. So one of the things also which is very good is occasionally to use the Bible, because the Bible gives us a very good context sometimes about what's happening. I'll just make a very quick reference to Psalm 2 and Psalm 83. First couple of verses in Psalm 2, which is a coronation hymn for the Son, for the Messiah, could have been also used for the coronation of the Davidic dynasty as well. But it says here in the first couple of verses, "Why are the nations restless and the people plotting in vain? The kings of the earth take their stand and the rulers conspire together against the Lord and against his Mashiach, his anointed one, saying, let's tear their shackles apart and throw their ropes away from us. He who sits in the heavens laughs, Yahweh scoffs at them." So the first thing he's saying here is that the nations are standing against Yeshua and they are rebelling and they're plotting. So that's a dynamic of human history, especially in our day. If one goes to Psalm 83, there's a filling in of some of the blanks there. First 5 verses of Psalm 83. God, do not remain quiet, do not be silent, and God, do not be still. For behold, your enemies, so it's clear, your enemies, God's enemies, make an uproar. And those who hate you have exalted themselves. They make shrewd plans against your people. See the transition? To go against the Jewish people here is to go against the God of the Jewish people. They conspire together against your treasured ones. They have said, come, let's wipe them out as a nation. so that the name of Israel will no longer be remembered. That's very Middle Eastern, certainly Iran, certainly Hamas, certainly Hezbollah, and certainly many of the 85,000 demonstrators in Montreal last week were saying the same thing. For they have conspired together with one mind, they make a covenant against you. So anti-Christ is anti-Jew. This is when you put Psalm 2 and Psalm 83 together, you get what's going on here. So none of this, in one hand, should be surprising if we know our Bible. And then he begins to list in verse 6 through 8, Edom, Ishmael, so that would be southern Jordan, and then what we call Saudi Arabia, Moab, that's central Jordan, Hagrites, that's the Sinai, Jabal, that's Lebanon, Ammon, which would be where you have Amman today in central Jordan, Amalek, also Sinai, Philistia, that would be the Gaza, the inhabitants of Tyre, that's the coast of Lebanon, Assyria, that's Iraq. They've all become a help to the children of Lot. This 3 verses is kind of like the news today. This is what's going on. And now that's not to say that everything has been fulfilled. It hasn't yet. But this is kind of what human history is. It's a rebellion of humankind against the God of Israel with hatred toward his people. So that's a context here, of course. And for those who have interest and you want to study at Psalm 83, look what it says toward the end of that psalm about how is God going to deal with the Middle Eastern peoples who are doing this. It says, let us possess for ourselves the pastures of God. Phil, if you go and look at my book, which is called Jews, Arabs in the Middle East, you can get it at davidstent.org. I break it down there. Most Bible commentaries can break it down for you. It's not that hard to find. Most study Bibles will break it down for you as well. So in Psalm 83, it says, make them like whirling dust, basically judge them, pursue them, terrify them, fill their faces with dishonor, something very important in the Arab world, so that they will seek your name. Interesting, there's a redemptive hint in verse 16 that only through the judgment of the enemies of God will they repent. Now, of course, most of us are just praying for peace, not understanding that there will be no peace. But God says, actually, if you want repentance in the Middle East, pray for God to bring a clarifying word of judgment to the nations against Israel. So again, this is very not PC, but this is very BC, biblically correct. And something to think about here as we try to then look at the question you were asking about. What do you have here, first of all? I just got back from Germany. Rachel and I were a week in the Saxony in eastern Germany. And, the shades, the echoes of what's been going on in Amsterdam. Some of you may not know, but after the riots, mostly Turkish and Moroccan immigrants, illegal immigrants in Netherlands, basically trying to injure and possibly kill Jewish Israelis who are coming for a football or soccer game, as we say in North America. What happened is many policemen in Amsterdam don't want to defend Jewish sites. They literally say, we don't want to stand guard at the Anne Frank House. We don't want to stand guard at the Jewish museums, at the Sephardic synagogue. This is kind of like 1933, 1941 in Amsterdam and in Germany. I heard that in Köln, a city in Germany, they've forbade the official stationing of Christmas trees in any public place because it offends the Muslims. But Muslims are allowed to have their muezzins sing very loud with megaphones, including curses against the Jews. So we're dealing with, in many senses, a post-Christian Europe. It's not getting better. It's getting worse. And these two Psalms, Psalm 2 and Psalm 83, really give us a clarity of what's going on and what God sees as solution. Whether or not America or Canada or Europe is going to take the solution that Psalm 83 gives, I think it's a fat chance. But nevertheless, that's what God says. And eventually he's going to achieve that. And one of the ways he's going to do that is through his army of Ezekiel 37, verses 9 through 11. But that's not specifically to be talked about. So what we have here, just 2 points to touch on, because I believe those are the two things that you asked about. One is, what about the International Criminal Court? And two, what about the Lebanese so-called ceasefire? So as far as the International Criminal Court, this has been something planned for some time. They've threatened to do this for some time. It's not the first time. It's the first time, I believe, that the International Criminal Court has called for the arrest of a national leader of a democracy. And they were involved in things with Serbia and Croatia, Yugoslavia. They were involved in things in Africa. But the actual setup here is invalid legally for a few reasons, and this is not a PhD dissertation on it. It's just fast food McDonald's. One is that Israel is not a member of the ICC, neither is America. Canada is. The second of all, that Israel has a functioning democracy, a parliamentary democracy, and has a legal system in order. So those two things mean that the ICC has no credibility or ruling, but that's not the point. The point is to make Israel a pariah state. And that brings us right back to Psalm 2. That's the whole rebellion going on, but it's when black is called white and green is called yellow, and those fighting against terror are called genocidal, but not the genocidal forces. They're given a carte blanche, as we say in Mexico. And so that's the first thing. And it's really moving forward. It's called lawfare. It's called weaponizing the justice system. That's what's going on now. And so that's a matter of prayer. Whether it'll be able to get stopped before the Lord returns or not, it still should be a matter of prayer that righteousness exalts a nation. Sin is a reproach to any people. So that's the first thing. The second thing, as far as why do people hate Bibi so much? Well, first of all, Israel is a democracy. So people have the right to hate whoever they want. You know, you shall hate the Lord your God with all your heart if you're going to turn things upside down. But as I've pointed out before, and you can read it in my newsletters, and you can read it in a few other sources because it's open source material, there are oligarchs and frustrated politicians who hate Bibi. Bibi is the longest serving prime minister. He served longer than David Ben-Gurion. He keeps getting in again and again. He's a cat of 9 lives, and he keeps getting in again and again because the people really stand for him, and his prosecution of the war is extremely popular, and his ratings in terms of voting is really high. But that's not what one hears about in the media, because we have the same problems in our media that America and Canada and Western Europe have in their media, which is media is not a news service. It's a propaganda outlet. That's what's going on. And we all get our propaganda from the propaganda outlet, like in 1984, George Orwell's book, and we think we're hearing the truth. We have no idea that we don't have any context to the text. And so what's going on is people like Ehud Barak and others are trying to do a putsch against Bibi, Benjamin Netanyahu. They've said it very clearly. They've said it numerous times. You can see it on YouTube, in Hebrew, in English. I've written about this, especially in the 2022, 23 in my newsletters, and you can go on davidstent.org and put in the word Barak, and you'll see all the quotes and all the videos dealing with these things. There's an attempt to overthrow a democratically elected leadership in there. And how do they do that? They use media to basically besmirch and lie about the prime minister. Now, the prime minister is not what I would call a highly godly man. Probably Nebuchadnezzar and Sennacherib and Cyrus were not so godly either. But nevertheless, he has done many good things in some areas, not in every area. I could tell you about the areas which I don't like, but that's not the point here. The point is he's doing a pretty good job in the things he's supposed to do. And most of what you hear on the news is actually propaganda, which is seditious and treasonous. And that's what's going on. That's what America amplifies, Canada amplifies, etc. So why do people hate him so much? It's not that they hate him so much. He's getting elected again and again. That has to be taken into consideration here. But there are lies which are going out. And there's a real good book, if anyone's interested, called Live Not by Lies, dealing with how believers are to stand in a corrupt society, especially as happened in communism in the East. So these are things going on. As far as Lebanon, and that's really short, that's McDonald's. I don't trust TBN or CBN so much. I study the news, I mind the news. Occasionally there's good things, but there's a lot of champagne in the news. Those who are friendly to Israel think everything about Israel is good. It's all Jaffa oranges and champagne and folk dancing and gefilte fish. But actually, it's very involved. And most, even the Jerusalem Post and the Times of Israel, they tend to be pretty much against the prime minister as well. There is All Israel News by Joel Richardson tends to be fairly good. At the same time, they say specialist is somebody 50 miles away from home. And many of these writers don't speak Hebrew and don't live in the Hebrew culture, even though they may happen to have a house in Israel. So this is important. Deep thinking is always found a little bit below the surface. So it's hard. That's the book. It's very, very good. So as far as the issue of Lebanon, I laugh because it's better than crying, but it's a very sober thing. The West doesn't have any understanding, having gone through a Reformation and an Enlightenment and a gradual secularization to where all biblical distinctives and perspectives are considered primitive and dangerous. So in the same way, the West doesn't understand jihad. They just don't get it. Jihad is not a distortion of Islam, it is Islam. It's one of the 6 pillars, so-called, of Islam. And jihad says basically we need to conquer the world and make everyone slaves, either willingly or unwillingly, of the message. Islam does not mean peace. It's not from salam. It's from submission. Submission. I don't know News Nation. Submission. And so the whole idea is you bow the knee and you accept the dictatorship of Islam, or you are murdered, or you are enslaved as a dhimmi, second-class person. This is where they're going from. This is where Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hamas, and Hezbollah, even though Hezbollah is Shiite, this is Iran. And so what's going on now is a very clear desire to do Psalm 2 and Psalm 83 on the part of these nations. And what they're doing is basically attacking Israel and hoping that there'll be enough forces, 7 nations, attacking Israel so that Israel will be defeated, or that by sacrificing unwillingly their own people who are made into cannon fodder in Gaza. Israel's trying desperately not to hurt Gazans, but the Hamas are trying to hurt Gazans. This is Colonel Kemp, Richard Kemp, of formerly in NATO, top British commander, who said basically that Israel is trying as hard as it can not to hurt civilians, and Hamas is trying as hard as it can to get their own civilians killed, because it goes over well on the news. So all the calls about genocide, the demonstrations, how is it that all of a sudden, one day after October 7th, 2023, there are demonstrations all over Europe and all over the world accusing Israel of genocide? This is gaslighting in a major deal. This is where we are. So the issue of Lebanon is that Hezbollah is one of the 7 weapons that Iran has supported and trained and catalyzed to attack and destroy Israel. And they actually attacked Israel one day after Hamas attacked Israel, supposedly because they're such close brothers with Hamas. They're actually Shiites. They hate Sunnis, but if they're against Israel, they're all in it together. And they've been attacking us, civilians. We've had 60,000 at least Israeli citizens have had to move away from the border because of Hezbollah attacks. Israel has gone in spite of some top generals who said, oh, it's terrible, it's going to all be terrible, don't do it. And Israel has managed to really prosecute the war very, very well. What is something that most people don't understand, and this will kind of be my last point, is there are many people in authority in Israel, I'm talking military, intelligence, and justice, who are totally opposed to the present government, who want to overthrow it by illegal means. I'm talking putsch. And these people are working very, very hard to try to use the laws to totally castrate the prime minister, to use the army not to do what the prime minister is saying. Stuff's come out that the prime minister was never given information that he needed to know what Hamas was doing. It was being concealed by the Shabak intelligence and by people in the army. Most of the top generals in the army, if they don't agree with an anti-Bibi position, are removed. So this does not you're not going to hear this in pro-Zionist news. You're not going to hear it in the majority of news because most people are either not aware of it or don't read the Hebrew. But this is what's going on. We've got some major problems in the country. You've got like a kind of if Galvin Newsom were trying to take over and block Trump, as he did to nearly every one of Trump's legal initiatives back when Trump was president. This is what's going on here, and it involves trying to get all the people in Israel out on the streets to declare their hatred for the prime minister. But now there's very, very few people coming out anymore because people are beginning to understand something's been going on which stinks. Like they say, fish and visitors stink after 3 days. This is stinking. And this is what's going on. So very short, that's a kind of a short answer to a long question.
Okay. Wow.